They told him to pick one of the two Apache slaves as a reward. He looked at them and chose both. Elias was not like most young men in the frontier settlement. While others spent their days tending fields or sharpening tools, he had a restless curiosity and a hunger for adventure that could not be tamed. Born on the edge of the desert, he had grown up hearing stories of brave men and daring deeds, tales that seemed too dangerous to be real, yet called to him with a magnetic pull. From an early age, he learned the skills necessary to survive in the harsh landscape: tracking, hunting, and reading the subtle signs of nature that others overlooked. The desert, with its harsh winds, shifting sands, and hidden dangers, had become both his home and his teacher. One morning, the settlement awoke to alarming news. A group of raiders known for their cunning and cruelty had been spotted near the outskirts of the region. They were moving fast, and by the time the villagers could prepare, the raiders would already be upon them. Fear swept through the community. Mothers clutched their children, fathers gathered makeshift weapons, and the elders called for a meeting to decide what to do. It was clear that action had to be taken quickly, but no one was willing to step forward first. Elias, however, felt a familiar surge of determination. He knew the desert and the surrounding hills in a way that no one else did. He could move silently, observe without being seen, and anticipate the movements of others, whether friend or foe. While some saw danger, he saw opportunity, a chance to prove himself, not for glory, but to protect the people he cared about. Without hesitation, he offered to scout ahead and confront the raiders, hoping to prevent a disaster before it could reach the settlement. The elders were hesitant. "It is too risky," one of them said. "You are brave, Elias, but even the best cannot face them alone." Yet Elias insisted. He explained that if he could study their route, learn their numbers, and understand their plans, he could create a strategy to safeguard the villagers. Reluctantly, the elders agreed, warning him to be careful and return safely. Elias set out at first light, moving through the golden sands with the ease of someone who had spent a lifetime in this unforgiving land. The wind whispered through the rocks, carrying the scent of sage and dust. As he traveled, he recalled every lesson his father had taught him: how to move quietly, how to recognize the faint footprints of humans or animals, how to read the sky for signs of coming weather or danger. Every sense was alert, every movement deliberate. Hours later, he spotted them, the raiders. They were a small group, but their speed and confidence were alarming. Elias crouched behind a rock, observing them carefully. He noticed patterns in their movements, small habits that could be used to his advantage. One of the raiders always walked slightly ahead, scanning the horizon, while another carried supplies in a way that slowed him down. Elias began planning, thinking of ways to separate them, delay them, or mislead them without engaging directly. As the sun climbed higher, Elias decided it was time to act. Using the natural contours of the land, he created a subtle trap, a diversion that would lead the raiders away from the main path to the settlement. He rolled small stones down a hill, carefully positioning them so that the raiders would hear the noise and investigate, believing it to be a potential threat. Then he moved silently through the brush, circling around to watch how they responded. The raiders, just as Elias predicted, were curious and cautious. They split up slightly to investigate, giving him the advantage he needed. With every step, Elias calculated the risks, staying hidden and moving with precision. The sun beat down on him, his throat was dry and his muscles ached, but he did not stop. His focus was absolute. His only goal was to ensure the safety of the settlement. By late afternoon, the plan began to work. The raiders became confused and disoriented, unsure of the terrain and suspicious of every sound. Elias used the opportunity to signal the villagers, guiding them to strengthen defenses and prepare for any possible confrontation. From a distance, he could see the relief on the faces of the settlers as they realized someone was taking charge. His heart swelled, not with pride, but with the quiet satisfaction of knowing he had helped protect his people. Eventually, the raiders, frustrated and weary, decided to retreat. Elias did not pursue them. He knew the desert could be dangerous and unpredictable, and it was better to ensure the settlement's safety than to chase personal glory. When he finally returned, the villagers greeted him with amazement. They had heard rumors of his clever strategy, though no one had seen the details. Elias simply shrugged, saying, "I only did what I could. We are all safer now, and that is enough." It was customary in those times to grant land, wealth, or even the service of captives as a reward for extraordinary deeds. In this case, Mr. Caldwell presented Elias with a difficult choice. Two captured Apache individuals, a brother and sister, held as slaves. He told Elias he could choose one as a reward for his heroic actions. Elias felt a moment of hesitation. The offer was tempting in practical terms. Having a skilled helper or companion could make life easier on the frontier. Yet as he looked at the two siblings, he saw more than opportunity. He saw fear, pain, and resilience. The brother held himself with quiet dignity, while the sister's eyes betrayed intelligence and courage. Elias realized that taking either of them as property went against everything he valued. The desert had taught him many lessons, but none were clearer than this. True strength was shown not in possession, but in respect and fairness. While the villagers waited for his answer, murmuring among themselves, Elias considered the implications. Choosing just one would satisfy tradition, but it would also feel like betrayal. The siblings had survived unimaginable hardships and should not be reduced to a prize. In that moment, Elias made a decision that would surprise everyone and test the limits of his own courage. He looked at Mr. Caldwell and then at the two siblings, meeting their eyes with a calm, steady gaze. "I will choose both," he said finally, his voice quiet but firm. A ripple of shock passed through the crowd. "But not as captives," he continued. "They will come with me as free people. Freedom is the only reward worth giving." Others, however, watched with curiosity, sensing that a rare courage was being displayed, a courage not just of the body but of the heart. Elias, for his part, felt no fear. His choice was clear because it was guided by principle. In the unforgiving frontier, many decisions were made for survival, but he believed that survival alone was not enough. Respect for others, justice, and humanity mattered more than tradition or convenience. As the sun began to set over the desert hills, casting long shadows across the settlement, Elias prepared to embark on a new chapter. The siblings, still wary but sensing his sincerity, agreed to follow him. Elias knew that the road ahead would not be easy. There would be skepticism, challenges, and the ever-present dangers of the wilderness. Yet he also knew that he had done what was right. In a land where so many struggled simply to survive, he had chosen to protect and honor the freedom of others. That evening, around the flickering light of a campfire, Elias and the siblings spoke cautiously but with growing trust. The settlement, though still filled with murmurs of disbelief, began to see the beginnings of change. The story of Elias' daring mission and his bold choice would ripple through the community for years to come, not just as a tale of bravery, but as a lesson in compassion, integrity, and courage. And so, what began as a dangerous mission to protect a settlement ended as a moment that tested the very values of a young man who refused to see the world in simple terms of reward and possession. Elias had faced danger, made a choice that defied convention, and stepped into a future where honor and humanity would guide every action. After Elias made his bold decision, the three of them, himself, the brother, and the sister, prepared to leave the settlement. The villagers watched in a mixture of awe, confusion, and whispered admiration. Some shook their heads, unable to understand why Elias would defy the traditional way of life. Others felt a flicker of hope, realizing that perhaps there was a different way to live, one guided by justice and fairness rather than fear and convention. Elias, however, paid little attention to the murmurs around him. His focus was on the journey ahead and the responsibility he had just accepted. The desert, which had always been a place of freedom for him, now held new meaning. Elias knew the road would not be simple. Even with his skills, guiding the siblings safely through the rugged landscape would be a test of patience, wisdom, and courage. He wanted them to feel safe, respected, and valued, not just led. From the moment they stepped beyond the edge of the settlement, Elias treated them with dignity, asking their opinions and listening to their concerns. The brother, whose name was Tama, and the sister, whose name was Naeli, were initially hesitant. They had faced harsh treatment from many people and were cautious of anyone offering kindness. Elias began slowly, teaching them the small but important skills needed to survive in the wilderness. He showed them how to read the tracks of animals and humans, how to find water in hidden places, and how to protect themselves from the desert's dangers. He did not present these lessons as orders or instructions. Instead, he explained and demonstrated, encouraging them to try and learn at their own pace. Naeli, sharp and quick-witted, picked up on the methods almost immediately, while Tama, more thoughtful and cautious, took longer but became reliable in his own way. Along the journey, Elias told stories of his childhood in the desert, of his father teaching him to respect the land, and of his mother's gentle wisdom that emphasized honesty and fairness. The siblings listened, their initial wariness gradually giving way to trust. They began to see Elias not only as a protector, but as a person who genuinely cared about them as human beings. Their laughter, rare and soft at first, began to fill the quiet spaces between the rocks and sand dunes, bringing a warmth that Elias had not expected. Despite the moments of calm, the desert remained a formidable presence. Sandstorms could appear suddenly, rivers could rise after a sudden rainfall, and wild animals roamed unseen until the last moment. Elias remained vigilant, moving ahead when necessary to scout paths, always aware of possible dangers. The siblings followed his lead, learning to read the signs of the land as he had taught them. One day, while crossing a narrow canyon, they spotted fresh tracks of a mountain lion. Elias explained how to approach the situation carefully, showing them how to avoid confrontation and use the terrain to stay safe. Naeli listened intently, her eyes wide but determined, while Tama followed every instruction with a careful steadiness. Beyond survival, Elias also emphasized respect and humanity. He explained the importance of honesty, fairness, and kindness, even in a world that often seemed harsh and unforgiving. He told them that every person they met deserved respect, regardless of background, and that courage was not just about facing danger, but about making difficult choices guided by conscience. The siblings began to understand, slowly but surely, that they were not just escaping a life of captivity. They were entering a new life shaped by values they had not been allowed to explore before. At night, under the vast desert sky, Elias would point out constellations and share their stories. He taught them to navigate by the stars and to notice subtle changes in the wind, clouds, and temperature. These moments became special to all three of them, providing comfort in the otherwise lonely and sometimes intimidating wilderness. The firelight would flicker across their faces, revealing both fear and excitement, and Elias often felt a deep sense of responsibility that was heavier than any physical burden he had ever carried. The journey was not without challenges. One afternoon, they came across a narrow stream that had swollen after a sudden rainfall. Crossing it was risky. The current was stronger than it appeared. Elias carefully tested the depth and flow, and then guided Tama and Naeli across step by step. Each time they stumbled, he steadied them with calm words and gentle hands. Their trust in him grew stronger with every challenge they overcame, and Elias felt a quiet pride in their courage. Food and water were constant concerns. The desert did not provide in abundance, and Elias had to balance finding nourishment for all three of them while moving steadily toward safer ground. He taught the siblings how to identify edible plants, how to hunt small game without waste, and how to conserve water. He emphasized patience, explaining that rushing or wasting resources could be dangerous. The siblings learned quickly, and they began to contribute more actively, earning a sense of pride in their own growing abilities. As they traveled, Elias also shared lessons about the world beyond the desert. He spoke of towns, markets, and the diverse people who lived there, explaining that the world was larger than just survival. He encouraged them to dream, to imagine possibilities for their lives beyond fear, captivity, and uncertainty. Nayeli began speaking more openly, sharing her hopes and fears, while Tama gradually learned to voice his opinions and make small decisions on his own. Elias listened carefully, never dismissing their thoughts, always encouraging their independence while ensuring their safety. Their days were long, often exhausting, but filled with learning and quiet discovery. The desert, once just a challenge, became a classroom, a playground, and a proving ground. Elia's careful guidance allowed the siblings to grow stronger, not just physically, but emotionally and mentally. They began to trust in themselves as well as in Elias, and this trust created a bond that went beyond necessity. It became friendship, mutual respect, and a shared understanding of courage and freedom. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky with shades of gold and pink, they paused on a hilltop overlooking a valley. Elias asked them to reflect on how far they had come, and the siblings were surprised at how much they had learned and endured. They realized that they were no longer simply fleeing a dangerous situation. They were becoming capable, independent, and confident individuals. For the first time, the desert felt less like a place of fear and more like a land of possibility. Elias also used these moments to remind them of a fundamental truth. Freedom was precious, but it came with responsibility. He explained that being free meant making wise choices, protecting oneself and others, and acting with integrity. The siblings listened intently, understanding that their journey was not just about escaping captivity, but about learning to live a life guided by principles and conscience. As the days passed, word of Elias' actions began to spread quietly through neighboring settlements. Some people doubted his methods and choices, thinking him reckless or too idealistic. Others, however, heard of his bravery and his refusal to accept cruelty or injustice, and quietly admired him. Elias paid little attention to the gossip. He focused instead on the present, on guiding Tama and Nayeli safely, and on ensuring that the lessons of courage, respect, and morality were understood not just in theory, but in practice. By the time they reached a more secure and fertile area near a small river, the siblings had transformed. Nayeli had grown confident in her abilities to find water, gather food, and navigate the landscape. Tama had developed patience, resilience, and skill in tracking and observing the land. Elias watched them, proud not for himself, but because he knew they were learning to take ownership of their lives in a way they had never been allowed before. Together, they began to build a sense of home in this new place. Elias knew the journey was far from over, but the first steps had been taken successfully. The siblings no longer looked at the world with fear, but with cautious optimism and growing strength. Elias felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing that his choice to treat them with respect and freedom was beginning to bear fruit. They were no longer captives. They were individuals with potential, courage, and the beginnings of a new life. Elias, Tama, and Nayeli had now traveled for several weeks. The desert behind them was slowly fading into rolling hills and sparse forests, and the siblings were growing stronger and more confident with each passing day. Elias could see the transformation in their faces. Where fear had once lingered, determination now shone. But he also knew that the hardest challenges were not just physical. The world beyond the desert carried its own trials, and they would need courage, patience, and intelligence to navigate what lay ahead. One morning, as the sun rose over the hills, Elias called the siblings together. "We have done well so far," he said, his voice steady and encouraging. "But the next part of our journey will test more than just our strength. You will face choices that may be difficult, situations where it is easy to act without thinking. I trust you to remember what we have learned." Tama, still more reserved but growing in his own quiet way, simply inclined his head, showing that he understood the gravity of Elia's words. The trio moved carefully through the hills, learning to read the subtle signs of the forest. Birds calling from the treetops, the rustle of leaves in the wind, even the smell of the soil after morning dew, all were clues to the presence of animals, paths, and hidden dangers. Elias taught them not only to observe but also to anticipate. "The world," he explained, "does not always show its challenges openly. You must learn to see the hidden ones, to be ready before they reach you." As they entered, Naeli clung slightly to Elia's arm, uncertain but curious. Tama, though less expressive, kept his eyes alert, scanning the surroundings. The villagers were surprised to see travelers, especially 3 young people moving with such confidence. They greeted Elias politely, offering water and food. The siblings hesitated at first, unsure whether to accept kindness from strangers. Elias encouraged them gently. "It is safe to trust for a moment," he said. "Not everyone seeks to harm, and some people will help if you show respect and gratitude." Tama observed the village's daily routines, learning about tools, farming, and simple crafts. Elias noticed how quickly they were learning, not just skills, but understanding how to interact with people in a world far wider than the desert. It was a delicate balance, teaching independence while encouraging respect for others. One evening, a sudden problem arose. A group of villagers had become trapped in the fields by a small, unexpected flood. The water was rising, and without immediate help, crops and tools would be lost. Elias did not hesitate. He guided Tama and Naeli, instructing them on how to move quickly and safely, using ropes and boards to secure the villagers. Their hands were steady, their minds alert, and together they managed to save not only the crops but also the people. The villagers were astonished by their bravery and teamwork. That night, as they rested by the fire, the siblings reflected on what had happened. Naeli spoke first. "I never thought I could do something like that," she admitted. "I always felt small and powerless, but today I felt strong. I felt that I mattered." Tama nodded in agreement. "It feels different," he said quietly. "I see that courage is not just about fighting, but about making the right choices when people need you." Elias smiled, proud not only of their success but of the understanding they were developing. The journey continued, but challenges were never far away. The forest was beautiful but unpredictable. One day, they encountered a steep ravine with a narrow bridge made of fallen logs. Crossing required careful balance and trust in one another. Elias went first, testing each step, and then guided the siblings across slowly, making sure they understood the importance of caution. Naeli almost stumbled at one point, but Elias caught her hand gently, whispering words of encouragement. Tama, usually steady, hesitated at the final plank, but Elias stayed beside him, showing patience and calm. Together, they crossed safely. Elias also taught them about strategy and thinking ahead. One afternoon, they observed a group of travelers from a distance, unsure of their intentions. Elias explained how to watch and analyze behavior before acting, emphasizing that sometimes the wisest choice was patience rather than confrontation. Naeli and Tama learned quickly, realizing that intelligence and observation were just as important as strength. Food remained a constant concern. They foraged for edible plants, fished in streams, and occasionally hunted small game. Elias used these opportunities to teach respect for life and balance in nature. "We take only what we need," he reminded them. "Every living thing has value, and we must not waste it." The siblings grew to understand this principle deeply, learning that survival depended not only on skill, but also on ethical decisions and respect for the world around them. During long evenings, Elias continued his lessons about freedom and choice. He spoke of the importance of courage, not just in facing danger, but in standing up for what is right. "You have been given a chance to live freely," he said one night, pointing at the stars. But freedom is not just about escaping captivity. It is about choosing kindness, integrity, and responsibility every day. That is what makes a life meaningful. Nayeli and Tama listened intently, absorbing his words as they lay beneath the vast, open sky. The siblings began to change visibly. Nayeli became more confident in her voice, offering suggestions and speaking up when decisions were needed. Tama developed patience and careful judgment, learning to assess situations before acting. Elias watched these changes with quiet satisfaction, knowing that his guidance was helping them grow not only as survivors but as thoughtful, capable individuals. One particularly difficult day tested them all. A sudden storm swept through the hills, with wind and rain making the path treacherous. Trees swayed dangerously, rocks became slippery, and streams swelled with water. Elias led the way, carefully choosing each step, and guided the siblings to a safe spot beneath a rocky overhang. The storm raged on, but they were protected. Inside their small shelter, they huddled together, listening to the wind and rain, learning patience and resilience. They shared stories and experiences, finding comfort in each other's presence. When the storm passed, the land had changed. Paths were altered, streams had shifted, and signs of wildlife were more abundant. Elias used the opportunity to teach adaptability, how to read the new landscape, plan alternate routes, and remain calm even when things did not go as expected. Nayeli and Tama understood that life was unpredictable, and success depended on flexibility, courage, and the ability to remain calm in the face of change. By the time they reached a safer area with fertile land and gentle hills, the siblings had grown not only in skill but in character. They were no longer simply survivors. They were active participants in their own lives, capable of making decisions and understanding consequences. Elias felt a deep sense of fulfillment. His choice to guide them with respect, patience, and freedom was proving to be the right one. The journey was far from over, but the bond among them had strengthened. Trust, respect, and shared experience had created a quiet but unbreakable connection. Elias, Tama, and Nayeli were no longer simply teacher and students. They were companions facing the world together, learning, growing, and discovering what it truly meant to live with courage, freedom, and integrity. Elias also knew that their story would continue to inspire others. Those they had helped along the way, even in small ways, would remember the lessons of courage, kindness, and respect. He understood that true leadership was not about being feared or commanding obedience, but about guiding others to realize their own strength and potential. As they camped under the stars that night, Elias felt a quiet sense of purpose. The desert and hills had tested them, taught them, and shaped them. The siblings had proven their courage, resilience, and willingness to grow. Elias knew the journey ahead would hold more challenges, but he also knew that together, they could face anything. The seeds of trust, freedom, and courage had been planted, and he felt certain they would continue to flourish. As Elias, Tama, and Nayeli continued their journey, the world around them began to change. The hills gradually gave way to a dense forest, its tall trees casting long shadows on the ground. The air was cooler, filled with the scent of pine and damp earth. While the forest offered protection from the scorching sun, it also presented new challenges. Paths were unclear, rivers swelled unpredictably after rainfall, and the sounds of wildlife, unfamiliar to the siblings, often caused unease. Elias knew that this stage of their journey would require not just skill, but patience, courage, and cooperation. Early one morning, as mist lingered among the trees, Elias gathered the siblings. "We must remain alert," he said. "The forest is beautiful, but it hides dangers we cannot always see. Remember what we have learned. Observe, think, and act carefully." Nayeli nodded, her eyes wide with anticipation, while Tama tightened his grip on a walking stick, ready to follow Elias' lead. Their first challenge came sooner than expected. As they crossed a narrow stream, they heard voices in the distance. A group of men had set up camp near the riverbank. Elias motioned for silence, crouching behind a fallen tree. The men were strangers, and Elias could not yet tell if they were hostile or friendly. He observed their movements carefully, noting that one man seemed aggressive, pacing back and forth while the others appeared more relaxed. Elias whispered to the siblings, "We wait and watch. Sometimes patience is the safest choice." They whispered questions to Elias, eager to understand how to judge the intentions of others. Elias explained, "Actions reveal more than words. Watch how they treat each other, how they move, and how they respond to the environment. That will tell us what kind of people they are." The siblings listened intently, learning that observation and careful judgment were as important as courage in ensuring safety. After several tense minutes, Elias decided it was safe to approach. He stepped forward, speaking calmly and respectfully, introducing himself and explaining that they were travelers seeking shelter and guidance. The men, initially wary, gradually relaxed. Elias allowed Tama and Naeli to speak, encouraging them to express themselves clearly and respectfully. The interaction went smoothly, and the travelers offered food and directions, teaching the siblings a vital lesson. Courage was not only about facing danger but also about honesty, respect, and effective communication. As they continued through the forest, the siblings grew increasingly confident. They began to identify edible plants, recognize the signs of animals nearby, and even notice subtle weather changes that Elias had taught them to observe. One day, they spotted a deer drinking from a stream. Elias explained how to watch quietly without disturbing it, emphasizing the importance of patience, restraint, and respect for life. Naeli and Tama practiced silently, learning that understanding the world sometimes required stillness and observation rather than immediate action. However, the forest was not only a place of learning, it was also a place of unexpected danger. One afternoon, while navigating a steep ravine, a sudden landslide blocked their path. Rocks and soil tumbled down, creating a barrier that seemed impossible to cross. Elias examined the situation carefully, considering their options. He could climb around, try to move the debris, or wait for the ground to stabilize. He chose the first option, testing each foothold with caution and ensuring the siblings followed carefully. Naeli slipped once, and Tama hesitated at a precarious ledge, but Elias stayed close, guiding them step by step until they reached safety. After the landslide, the siblings rested, reflecting on the lesson it had taught them. "Life will not always be easy," Elias said. "Obstacles appear without warning, and sometimes the simplest path is blocked. What matters is how we respond, with patience, courage, and careful thought." Naeli and Tama nodded, realizing that their journey was teaching them more than survival. It was teaching them resilience, problem-solving, and the importance of remaining calm under pressure. During another part of the journey, they encountered a small village at the edge of the forest. The villagers were initially suspicious of outsiders, but Elias spoke with honesty and respect, explaining their journey and intentions. He allowed the siblings to interact, helping them learn how to communicate, offer assistance, and build trust. Naeli helped gather water and food for the villagers, while Tama assisted in repairing a fence damaged by recent storms. Their efforts were met with appreciation, and the villagers offered guidance on safe paths through the forest. Elias reminded the siblings, "Every kind act, every moment of cooperation, strengthens not only others but ourselves as well. You will encounter people who act out of fear or anger, situations where the right decision may not be the obvious one. Courage is not just about facing danger, it is about choosing what is right, even when it is difficult. We rely on respect, empathy, and careful thought. We consider the consequences of our actions, and we act in ways that protect others and ourselves. It is not always simple, but it is always worth trying." Elias assessed the situation carefully, measuring each step and considering the safest route. He instructed the siblings to hold onto vines and rocks, move slowly, and support one another. Naeli nearly lost her balance at one point, but Elias and Tama steadied her. The crossing was tense, but their cooperation and trust allowed them to succeed. These experiences strengthened their bond. The siblings learned to rely on each other, while Elias guided them with patience and encouragement. They discovered the importance of teamwork, communication, and shared responsibility. Each challenge, from landslides to treacherous paths, became an opportunity to grow, not just in skill but in character. One day, they encountered a group of travelers who were struggling to transport supplies through the forest. Elias approached, offering assistance. He encouraged the siblings to help as well, demonstrating how cooperation and kindness could create solutions. Working together, they managed to stabilize the travelers' load and guide them safely through the forest. The experience taught the siblings that courage was not only about personal survival, but also about helping others when possible. Throughout the journey, Elias continued to emphasize freedom, integrity, and moral responsibility. He reminded the siblings that their choices had consequences, not just for themselves but for others. Nayeli and Tama began to understand that true strength included empathy, compassion, and the ability to act with fairness. These lessons were reinforced daily, in both small acts of survival and interactions with other people they met along the way. By the time they reached a safer area at the forest's edge, the siblings had grown significantly. Nayeli had become confident in her abilities, speaking up and making decisions when necessary. Tama had developed careful judgment, patience, and resilience. Elias looked at them with quiet pride, knowing that the choices they had made together, guided by courage and respect, were shaping them into capable and thoughtful individuals. Yet, Elias knew that the journey was far from over. Challenges would continue to arise, testing their courage, patience, and morality. The lessons they had learned so far, however, had prepared them well. They understood that freedom came with responsibility, that courage was measured not just in facing danger but in making the right choices, and that trust and cooperation could overcome even the most difficult obstacles. One evening, as the three sat by a fire under a sky full of stars, Elias spoke softly. "Our journey has not been easy, but it has been meaningful. We have faced danger, learned from mistakes, and discovered what it means to be responsible, courageous, and free. Remember this, every choice you make matters. Every act of kindness, patience, or courage changes the world, even in small ways." They felt gratitude toward Elias, not just for his protection, but for teaching them how to live with dignity and purpose. As they prepared to rest for the night, Elias reflected quietly on their journey so far. The forest had tested them in ways the desert never had, but it had also taught them lessons about cooperation, observation, and moral courage. He knew that their bond, strengthened through shared challenges and triumphs, would carry them through whatever lay ahead. With the fire crackling softly and the stars shining above, Elias felt certain that the siblings were ready for the next stage of their journey, whatever it might bring. The journey that had begun in the harsh desert had now brought Elias, Tama, and Nayeli to the edge of a fertile valley, where the land opened up to rolling meadows and a gentle river. The landscape was unlike anything the siblings had seen before: lush grass, tall trees, and the sound of water flowing over smooth stones. For the first time, they felt a sense of relief and possibility. Elias, too, felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing that their long and challenging journey was approaching a meaningful turning point. As they descended into the valley, they saw a small settlement in the distance. Houses made of wood and stone dotted the landscape, smoke rising from chimneys in a peaceful rhythm. Children ran through open fields, laughing and playing, while adults tended gardens and livestock. The sight of this community stirred a mixture of hope and apprehension in the siblings. They had learned to survive in harsh conditions, but now they faced the challenge of integrating into a larger society. Elias reminded them gently, "We have learned courage, patience, and responsibility. Now it is time to practice kindness, respect, and cooperation among others. This is just as important as survival." At first, there was curiosity, then caution. Elias introduced the siblings respectfully, explaining that they were travelers who had faced many challenges and sought a safe place to learn, work, and live. Nayeli and Tama followed his example, speaking honestly about themselves and their journey. The villagers, impressed by their composure and honesty, began to warm to them. Over the next few days, Elias helped the siblings settle in. Nayeli was eager to contribute and quickly began assisting with household tasks, learning new skills such as cooking and weaving. She approached each task with patience and attention, showing the villagers that she was capable and willing to work alongside them. Tama, more reserved but equally diligent, assisted with farming and repairs. He observed carefully, asking questions, and gradually gained the trust of the villagers with his steady and reliable work. Elias encouraged them to interact and form friendships. Kindness and respect are as important as skill, he reminded them. The way we treat others shapes our lives as much as the choices we make for ourselves. The siblings took his words to heart. Nayeli offered to help a woman mend clothes, and the woman, surprised by her willingness and attentiveness, began to teach her more advanced sewing techniques. Tama helped a farmer repair a fence and was praised for his careful attention to detail. Slowly, the siblings became valued members of the community. Despite this peaceful environment, challenges continued to appear. One day, a neighboring settlement requested help. A bridge connecting two villages had been damaged by a storm, making it difficult for people to transport goods and supplies. Elias saw this as an opportunity for the siblings to apply the lessons they had learned. Together, they traveled to the site, assessed the situation, and devised a plan to repair the bridge. Nayeli organized materials and tools, while Tama assisted with construction. Elias guided them, offering advice but allowing them to take the lead. Their cooperation and problem-solving skills impressed both communities, demonstrating their growth and the value of courage and responsibility. Through these experiences, the siblings began to understand the deeper meaning of freedom. They realized that freedom was not just the absence of captivity, but the ability to make choices guided by conscience, empathy, and respect for others. Nayeli said one evening as they walked along the riverbank, "I used to think being free just meant running away from danger. Now I understand it means choosing kindness, courage, and responsibility every day." Tama nodded, adding, "And understanding that our actions affect others, not just ourselves." Elias smiled, proud that they had internalized lessons that went far beyond survival. Life in the valley was not without its tests. One day, a severe storm struck, with heavy rain, strong winds, and fallen trees blocking paths. The villagers were in danger, and crops were at risk of being destroyed. Elias guided Tama and Nayeli in helping secure homes and protect livestock. They worked tirelessly alongside the villagers, demonstrating courage, problem-solving, and resilience. By the end of the storm, the village had suffered minimal damage, and the community praised their efforts. The siblings realized that their actions had a direct impact on the safety and well-being of others, reinforcing the lessons Elias had been teaching them all along. As the seasons changed, the siblings grew more confident and self-reliant. Nayeli developed a talent for teaching younger children basic skills, sharing her knowledge of plants, water sources, and survival techniques. Tama became adept at repairing structures and organizing work for the community. Elias continued to mentor them, focusing not only on skills but also on moral guidance. He emphasized that leadership was not about authority but about service, empathy, and setting a positive example. The siblings absorbed these lessons and began to exhibit qualities of leadership themselves. The bond among the three had deepened over time. They had faced countless challenges together, from deserts and forests to storms and uncertain strangers. Through every trial, they had learned to trust each other, communicate effectively, and make difficult decisions guided by courage and conscience. Elias often reflected on the journey and realized that the growth of the siblings was a reward far greater than any material prize. One day, news arrived that a nearby settlement was struggling to manage a conflict between two families over land and resources. Elias saw this as another chance to teach the siblings about diplomacy, fairness, and empathy. Together, they traveled to the village, listened to both sides carefully, and helped mediate a solution that was fair and reasonable. Naeli suggested compromises that took into account the needs of all parties, while Tama ensured practical solutions were possible and safe. Elias guided them, praising their thoughtfulness and encouraging them to consider long-term consequences. The families, impressed by their honesty and fairness, accepted the resolution. The siblings realized that courage and freedom were not only about physical survival, but also about making the world a better place for others. As time passed, Elias began to see the siblings flourish into independent, capable individuals. Naeli's confidence had grown so much that she began leading small projects in the village. Tama had become a trusted problem solver, known for his careful thinking and steady judgment. Elias felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that their journey had transformed them, and that the lessons he had imparted had taken root. One evening, as the sun set over the valley, Elias gathered the siblings near the river. "Look at how far you have come," he said. "You have faced dangers, solved problems, helped others, and learned to trust yourselves. Your journey has taught you courage, freedom, and responsibility. Remember that these lessons are more valuable than anything else. The choices you make will shape your future and the world around you. Freedom is about making the right choices, helping others, and acting with integrity." Tama nodded, adding, "And courage is about facing challenges, not just with strength but with wisdom and care for others." Elias felt a quiet pride, knowing that their understanding had grown far beyond what words could express. The siblings continued to live in the valley, fully integrating into the community while retaining the lessons from their journey. They helped others, solved problems, and demonstrated courage and responsibility in everyday life. Elias, content with their growth, knew that the choices he had made, especially choosing to free and guide them, had created a ripple effect that would continue to benefit many people. Over time, their story spread beyond the valley. Travelers, neighbors, and even distant settlements heard of Elias' courage, the siblings' transformation, and the way they worked together to make life better for themselves and others. People were inspired by their journey, learning that true freedom was not simply about escaping danger, but about making wise and moral choices, helping others, and facing challenges with courage and integrity. As the years passed, the siblings grew into respected, capable adults. Naeli became known for her wisdom, compassion, and leadership, while Tama gained a reputation for fairness, intelligence, and reliability. Elias watched them with pride, knowing that his guidance had helped shape not only their skills but also their character. The lessons they had learned together, the importance of courage, freedom, respect, and responsibility, remained with them, guiding every choice they made. In the quiet evenings by the river, the three often reflected on their journey. They remembered the deserts, the forests, the challenges, and the people they had met along the way. They realized that every obstacle had been an opportunity to grow, every decision an opportunity to learn, and every act of kindness a chance to make the world a little better. Elias knew that their journey had come full circle, from survival to growth, from fear to courage, and from captivity to freedom. Finally, Elias understood the greatest reward was not material wealth, recognition, or fame. It was seeing Tama and Naeli thrive, confident in their abilities, guided by wisdom, and living with integrity. Their story was a testament to the power of courage, moral choices, and compassion. It showed that freedom is most meaningful when combined with responsibility, and that true courage is measured not only in facing danger, but in choosing what is right even when it is difficult.